A smile across stars. The space station Zereth Prime was always full of noise, lights, and strange smells. It floated quietly above a dead moon, but inside, life was wild. Aliens from hundreds of planets walked its shiny halls. Some wore armor, some had tails, some had 4 eyes, or none at all. But no one cared. As long as you paid your bills and didn't start fights, Zereth Prime was home. Kai, a young human pilot, sat alone in a corner of the glowing neon bar called the Silver Fang. He had messy brown hair, a half-smile on his face, and a small scar over his left eyebrow. He sipped something blue and fizzy. The drink was terrible, but it was cheap. He wasn't looking for trouble. Well, maybe just a little. That's when she walked in. The music stopped for a second. Not really, but it felt like it did. Heads turned. Conversations paused. She was tall, graceful, and completely silent. Her skin shimmered like deep space, purple with silver lines moving slowly across her arms. She wore a dark cloak with soft armor underneath. Her eyes glowed like twin stars. And behind her, moving gently, were tentacles. 4 of them, long, smooth, alive. Everyone looked away. Some whispered. Some got up and left. Kai didn't. He stared, then smiled. Well, he whispered to himself, that's new. She sat alone at the bar, a few stools down from him. She didn't order anything. She just stared ahead. The bartender, a nervous green alien with 3 hands, barely met her eyes. Miss, drink. She said nothing, just nodded once. Kai stood up slowly, drink in hand. His friend Juno, a short reptile-like alien, grabbed his sleeve. What are you doing, Kai? That's a Tyrellan. A what? Tyrellan. Juno hissed. War race. Dangerous. That's not a girl you flirt with. That's a girl who can tear your bones out through your nose. Kai laughed. Sounds like my ex. Juno shook his head, worried. I'm serious. So am I. Kai gave him a wink and walked over. The alien girl didn't look at him. Her tentacles moved slowly, like they were breathing. Kai leaned on the bar beside her. You look like trouble. No response. He smiled. I like trouble. Still nothing. The bartender backed away. Kai continued. You come here often. Or is this your first time making everyone in a room want to pee themselves? Finally, she turned. Her eyes locked with his. They were deep, like the night sky. She didn't blink. One tentacle rose slowly. It touched his cheek. It was warm, softer than it looked. Then, suddenly, it wrapped around his wrist. People gasped. One alien dropped his drink. Juno ducked under a table. Kay's heart raced, but he didn't pull away. She leaned close. Her voice was quiet but strong. You are brave, or stupid. Kai smirked. A little of both. She looked at him for a long moment. Then her tentacle glowed, and left a faint golden mark on his skin. A strange symbol, alive, moving like it had its own pulse. She let go. The tentacle fell back behind her. She stood up. Flirt again, she whispered, and you'll see the truth. She walked out of the bar. The door hissed shut behind her. Silence returned. Kai looked down at his wrist. The mark shimmered. It tingled. What the hell just happened? He said. Juno crawled out from under the table. You're dead. That's what happened. But Kai only smiled, rubbing the strange mark. And for the first time in a long time, he felt excited. Something had started. Something big. And there was no turning back now. Mark of the Tyrellan. The night after the bar incident, Kai couldn't sleep. Not because of the glowing mark on his wrist. Not because he had flirted with an alien who could probably break him in half with one hand or one tentacle. It was the feeling. Like something had woken up inside him. He lay on his narrow bunk inside his small pilot cabin on Zereth Prime. The walls were thin. He could hear the engines humming. the loud boots of passing soldiers, and the soft buzzing from neon signs outside his window. But louder than all of that was the sound inside his head. Whispers. They weren't words. Not exactly. More like a language he didn't understand, but somehow felt. And every time he looked at the golden mark on his wrist, it pulsed, like a heartbeat. He sat up and grabbed a scanner. The screen blinked. Unknown biosignature. Energy level. Rising. "What are you?" Kai whispered. The mark shimmered again. Then his lights flickered. And for just a second, he saw her. Not in person. In his mind. Villari. That was her name. He didn't know how he knew. He just did. She stood in the center of a dark, silent field. Tentacles around her. Glowing. Watching him. Then she spoke, not with her mouth, but directly into his thoughts. "They will come for you. Run." And then she was gone. The next morning, Kai rushed to the market level of Zareth Prime. He pushed through thick crowds, humans, insectoids, scaled beings, and other creatures of all shapes and smells. He needed answers. He found an old contact, Drim, a one-eyed alien tech fixer who once helped Kai hack a cargo contract for extra fuel credits. Drim lived inside a floating shack made of scrap metal, hanging from the ceiling of the station like a parasite. "Drim," Kai said, out of breath. "I need a scan." Drim looked up, blinking his mechanical eye. "Oh, it's the handsome idiot. What did you steal this time?" Kai showed his wrist. Drim's smirk faded. "Get inside." Now, inside, the lights were dim. Machines clicked. Screens glowed with ancient languages. Drim scanned the mark. His hands shook. This is Tyrellan code." "I figured," Kai said. "She's Tyrellan." Drim snapped. "Then why are you still alive?" Kai frowned. "I don't know. She marked me. Said something like, 'Flirt again, you'll see the truth.' Then walked away." Drim stared at him. "You don't understand. Tyrellans don't flirt. They don't smile. They don't even touch other species unless they're about to kill them." "Well, maybe I'm special." Drim shook his head. "This mark. It's called Zarketh. It means chosen link. Tyrellans use it in only one case." Kai leaned in. "What case?" Drim whispered, "When they find someone they believe has a part in their future. Could be love. Could be war. Could be both." Kai blinked. "So, I'm part of her destiny." Drim grunted. "Or her target. Hard to say with Tyrellans." Before Kai could reply, Drim's alarm blared. Red lights flashed. Unknown life forms approaching. The computer warned. Level 7. Sector 3. Armed. Drim checked the feed. 3 tall, shadowy aliens in black armor walked through the hall. They didn't ask questions. They didn't speak. They melted a door and dragged out a human. Kay's eyes widened. "That's near my ship." Drim pointed to the wrist mark. "They're tracking you." Kai stood. "Then I need to find her." Drim shouted, "You're going to run toward the monster." Kai gave a small smile. "She could have killed me that night. She didn't. I want to know why." Back near the docks, Kay's ship had been torn open. Someone had clearly searched it. His systems were fried. His messages erased. But one thing waited for him in the pilot's seat. A small silver cube, alien-made. He touched it. It lit up and floated into the air. A hologram appeared. Villari. She wore a different cloak now, lighter, marked with symbols Kai didn't recognize. Her voice was calm, but serious. "If you are seeing this, you survived. That means you are strong. Or lucky." Kai watched silently. "The mark on your wrist is not just a symbol. It is a key. You are now bound to me and to my mission." She paused, then added, "Do not trust the ones in black. They are silent root, Tyrellan traitors. They will kill you to steal the key." The image flickered. "Come to planet Nera 7. There, I will explain everything. If you don't come. She looked straight into his eyes. You will die without knowing why. The message ended. The cube fell and shattered into dust. Kai exhaled slowly. Neris 7, ha. Sounds lovely this time of year. Back in the shadows of the docking bay, the silent root agents watched from a distance. One of them, taller than the rest, spoke into a hidden comm device. The human has the key. Confirmed. A crackling voice replied. Follow him. Do not engage. Yet. The agent hissed softly. He is marked by her. Then we will burn the mark from his bones. Alien hunt. The journey to Neris 7 was not quiet. Not when Kai was being hunted. He flew a stolen shuttle, old, rusty, and barely holding together. The engines whined like a dying animal. The ship's name, Lucky Dust, was scratched into the hull in 3 different languages, probably not lucky for its last owner. He had no choice. His own ship was destroyed. His name was flagged across 3 systems. And worst of all, someone, or something, was following him. He could feel it. On the second day of his flight, just past the red rings of Nebula Drift 41, he spotted it. A black shadow in space. Sleek. Fast. No transponder. No lights. Silent route. Kay didn't wait. He punched the thrusters. The old shuttle groaned and shook, but it moved. The dark ship followed. Lasers burst through space, glowing green and sharp. One shot hit the back of his ship, cutting power for 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, Kai remembered every bad decision he ever made. Flirting with Velari might top the list. He managed to escape, barely, by flying through an asteroid field. The silent root ship didn't follow. Maybe they didn't want to risk it. Or maybe they didn't need to. Because when Kai landed on Neris 7, they were already there. Neris 7 wasn't like Zereth Prime. No bars, no lights, no laughter. It was a forgotten world. Quiet, cold, covered in white fog that hugged the black rocks like a ghostly blanket. The air smelled like ash and metal. Kai stepped out of his ship. His boots sank into the wet ground. The sky above was cracked and stormy. In the distance, massive ruins of ancient alien buildings rose like bones from the earth. He held up his wrist. The golden mark glowed brighter than ever. And it pointed, somehow pulled, him toward the ruins. He didn't ask how. The mark was alive. He was used to that now. As he walked through the broken halls of what looked like an old alien temple, he heard a voice. Sharp. Metallic. Inhuman. You shouldn't have come, human. He turned fast. 3 figures stepped from the shadows. Silent root. Black armor. No eyes visible. They didn't attack. Yet. The tallest one stepped forward. His voice echoed through his helmet. The Torellan girl made a mistake. But you don't have to die for it. Kai raised his hands. I didn't ask for the mark. It chose you, the figure said. And so did she. Hay's heart raced. What do you want? The figure answered. Her location. Give us the key. The mark on your wrist unlocks something. Powerful. Dangerous. Kai backed up slowly. Then maybe you shouldn't have it. The leader tilted his head. We will take it either way. That's when something fast and purple dropped from the ceiling. Velari. She moved like lightning. Her tentacles lashed out. 2 grabbed the nearest soldier, lifting him into the air and slamming him into the wall. The second turned to fire, but she spun, cutting his gun in half with a glowing blade. The leader tried to retreat, but Velari was faster. She grabbed his helmet and crushed it with a loud crack. The silent root were deadly, but she was worse. In less than a minute, it was over. Kai stared, heart pounding. You followed me. Velari turned to him. Her glowing eyes softened slightly. No, I was already here, waiting. He nodded slowly. So you really did want me to come? Yes. Why? She stepped closer. Because the key you carry, it's not just a symbol. Kai looked at the mark. Then what is it? Valeri's tentacles moved gently, like they were listening. It's a bond, Kai, she said. One made long ago, between humans and my kind. Before the wars, before the lies. Kai was quiet. The fog swirled around them. You mean, we were allies once? Valeri nodded. More than that. We were connected, but the bond was broken. My people erased the history. Yours forgot it. Kai frowned. So why now? Why mark me? Valeri hesitated. One of her tentacles touched his wrist. The glow spread up his arm. You touched me without fear. That has power. In Tyrellan law, it activates a test, an ancient rite. You passed it. He looked into her eyes. What happens now? She looked away. Now, you must choose. They entered the heart of the ruins. Inside was a chamber filled with floating crystals, glowing blue and gold. At the center was a platform, and above it, a black sphere, spinning slowly, humming with deep energy. Valeri stood beside it. This is a memory core, she said. It holds the truth, but it only opens with two things, Tyrellan blood. She sliced her palm and pressed it to the base. And human courage. She turned to him. You must touch it. If you do, you'll see what our people try to hide. But once you do, there's no going back. Kai stepped forward. He stared at the orb. It pulsed softly. Behind him, he could almost feel the silent root regrouping. They wouldn't stop. Not until they had what they wanted. He looked at Valeri. I flirted with a girl, he said. Didn't expect it to lead to alien secrets, ancient powers, and death threats. She smiled, just a little. You flirted with a Tyrellan warrior. That was your first mistake. He grinned. Still worth it. He placed his hand on the orb. It lit up, blinding and bright. And the world changed. The forbidden planet. Darkness. Not the kind Kai had known. Not like night or space. This was memory dark, soul dark. The kind that reached into your chest and pulled you into someone else's past. Kai stood in the center of a floating world. No ground, no sky. Only glowing threads of energy stretching across the air like roots of some ancient tree. The memory core was inside his mind now. He saw images forming around him, moving like ghosts. A human and a Tyrellan, standing side by side, hands locked, tentacles wrapped gently around the human's back. They weren't enemies. They were lovers. Then the scene changed. A council, many alien leaders, human generals, a planet burning in the background. A treaty signed with glowing blood. Humans and Tyrellans had once been one alliance, unbreakable. But something had changed. A betrayal. A secret. He saw a group of Tyrellans in black armor, the silent root. They turned on their own. They destroyed the memory core's temples. They erased records, killed witnesses. And the final image. A single Tyrellan warrior escaping through fire, carrying a human child in her arms. The bloodline must survive, she whispered. Then it all faded. Kai opened his eyes with a gasp. The orb dimmed and floated gently to the side. He was back in the temple, still standing, but barely. His knees felt weak. Valeri stood nearby, watching him. You saw it, she said quietly. Kai nodded. We were partners. We were more than that. Yes. He looked at her, and now they want to wipe it all away. Valeri stepped forward, her tentacles calm, gentle, because the truth would destroy the control they've built. If humans and Tyrellans remember what we were, then they'll know what we can be again, Kai finished. They stood in silence. The glow from the orb painted gold across their faces. Kai finally spoke again. That child in the vision, the human the Tyrellan warrior saved, who was he? Valeri hesitated. Then, quietly, I believe it was your ancestor. Kay's heart skipped. What? You are not marked by chance, Kai. You were always part of this. The mark on his wrist pulsed stronger. Kai took a step back, overwhelmed. So I'm some chosen hero now. Villari tilted her head. Not a hero. Just a key. Kai let out a breath. Yeah, well, being the key is exhausting. They left the ruins before sunset. If you could call it that. Neris 7's sun was pale and distant, barely pushing light through the thick clouds. They found shelter in a broken observatory at the top of a cliff. From there, they could see the valley below, black rocks, alien vines, and strange glowing creatures crawling through the fog. Inside, it was quiet, safe, warm enough. Kai sat near the shattered window. Villari sat across from him, sharpening a small blade. He watched her. Why do you keep fighting? He asked. Villari didn't look up. Because if I don't, the truth dies. That's not the only reason, he said softly. She stopped, looked up. No, it's not. She stood and walked over to him. I was born a weapon, she said. Trained to kill, to protect secrets, to silence threats. And now? He asked. Now, I want to protect something different. Kai looked at her. Me. She didn't answer, but her tentacles moved slowly, wrapping lightly around his arm. You are not like the others, she said. You feel too much. You speak when others stay silent. Kai smiled. I'm annoying like that. She smiled back, small, but real. You touched me when no one else dared. Not because of power, just curiosity. He shrugged. You looked interesting. I still do. Kai met her eyes. More than ever. The room went quiet. One of her tentacles brushed his cheek. This time, he didn't flinch. She leaned closer, and for a moment, her forehead rested against his. Not quite a kiss. Not yet. But something real. Later that night, as they rested, a soft beep echoed through the observatory. A warning signal. Villari shot up. They found us. Kai grabbed his jacket. Silent route. Villari nodded. They never stop. She opened a hidden panel in the wall and pulled out a Torellan relic, a crystal cube humming with power. We can't fight them here, but we can lead them away. Kai nodded. Where to? There's one place they fear. A place even they won't go. Kai raised a brow. Let me guess. It's called something super comforting, like the friendly meadow. Villari looked at him. It's called the Grave of Minds. Perfect, Kai muttered. Can't wait. They ran through the valley. Fog clung to their legs. The ground shook. Silent root dropships descended behind them, landing hard, lights flashing through the mist. Laser bolts flew past. Rocks exploded. One shot nearly clipped Kai's shoulder. Villari moved like fire, her tentacles deflecting beams, her blades slicing through vines and branches. They reached the edge of a cliff. Below, black water. Still. Cold. Villari pointed. We jump. Kai blinked. You didn't mention water. She grabbed his hand. You trust me. He looked into her glowing eyes. Then nodded. Yeah. They jumped. Underwater, it felt like time slowed. Strange lights swam past them. Tiny orbs, living, glowing. They lit the path below. Villari led him deeper. Finally, they reached a cave hidden under the cliff. The water inside parted as they entered. A massive door stood before them, covered in markings Kai couldn't read. Villari pressed the relic crystal into a slot. The door opened. Inside was the Grave of Minds, a silent hall, walls lined with thousands of crystal skulls, each one glowing softly, each one once a mind, a memory of a Torellan warrior who carried forbidden knowledge. This, Villari whispered, is where the truth lives. Kai looked around, awestruck. And where we'll find the weapon to stop them. Vilari nodded. Not a weapon made of metal. A weapon made of memory. War inside her. The Hall of the Grave of Minds was unlike anything Kai had ever seen. The silence wasn't just quiet. It was heavy. It pressed against his skin, his thoughts, even his heartbeat. The walls glowed faintly with soft blue light, and each skull on the shelves shimmered with tiny sparks, like trapped stars, waiting to speak. He turned slowly. Thousands of them. Perfectly lined. Perfectly still. This place feels. Kai paused, searching for the word. Vilari finished it for him. Sacred. She stepped into the center of the chamber. Her tentacles were calm but tense, like they were sensing something deeper in the air. Her eyes scanned the skulls. These, she said quietly, belong to the Terrellan keepers, warriors who chose to store their thoughts, their pain, their memories, instead of letting them fade. Kai walked beside her, like a library. She nodded, but with blood instead of books. That gave Kai chills. They reached a tall stone pedestal in the center. A single skull rested there, larger than the others, gold-lined, humming gently. Vilari's expression changed. She stopped moving. Her eyes went cold. Kai looked at her. "What is it?" She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "That skull belonged to my mother." Kai was stunned. "Your?" Vilari stepped forward, slowly, like walking into a dream she didn't want to remember. She was the last high warrior of the true Bond Order, the ones who believed in peace with humans. The silent root hunted them all. She gave herself to this grave before they could take her mind. Kai looked at the glowing skull, then back at Vilari. "You've been fighting them your whole life." "I was born for it," she said, voice harder now. "Raised to kill. Taught never to trust anyone, especially not humans." She turned to face him, her eyes burning. "But then you smiled at me, like none of that mattered." Kai didn't speak. He knew this wasn't the moment for jokes. Vilari touched the skull. The glow increased. And then, the skull spoke. Not with sound, but with light. A beam burst upward, forming an image in the air, a tall Terrellan warrior woman. Her face looked like Vilari's, but older, wiser, sadder. The memory spoke. "To the one who bears my blood, and the one marked by fate, your time has come." Kai stepped back. "She sees me." Vilari looked just as shocked. Her mother's memory continued. "You must awaken the Echo Flame, the last bond weapon between our kinds. It lives in the caves below this place. But beware. The price of awakening, it is not strength. It is truth." The image faded. The light dimmed. Vilari dropped to one knee, breathing heavily. Kai rushed to her. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer. Her tentacles were moving fast now, twitching with emotion. "I didn't expect." Her voice. "After all this time." Kai placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore." She looked up. For a second, her eyes shimmered, not with power, but pain. Then she stood. "There's a path below," she said. "The Echo Flame is hidden deep, and Silent Root is getting closer." They followed a spiral staircase down, deeper into the mountain. The air grew colder, thicker. Kai's wrist mark burned with heat. Vilari's armor started to glow. Finally, they entered a wide cavern filled with floating red crystals. At the center was a glowing pool, blood red, pulsing like a heart. Vilari stepped to the edge. "The Echo Flame," she whispered. Kai looked at it. "That doesn't look like a weapon." "It's not." Vilari stepped into the pool slowly, her body glowing with each step. "It's a fire of memory. It burns away the lies and shows who we really are." Kai's eyes widened. "Wait, you're going in there?" "I have to complete the bond, to accept what I ran from." Kai's voice cracked. "And what happens if it's too much?" Vilari turned to him, a soft smile on her lips. "Then, remember me as someone who once believed again." She stepped fully into the red pool. The light swallowed her. Kai couldn't move. He watched as her body floated, wrapped in glowing strands. Her eyes were closed. Her tentacles stretched outward, still and suspended in the air. Then she began to change. Not her form, her memories. Visions flashed in her mind. Her as a child, crying over her mother's body. Being trained by cold hands, told never to feel, never to question. Her first kill, her first fear, her first doubt. And then, Kai, his smile, his terrible jokes, his reckless heart, and something broke inside her, not like a wound, like a chain. The fire inside her didn't burn her. It freed her. And suddenly, the tentacles burst outward in flame, but not fire. Energy. Raw, ancient, beautiful. The symbols of her kind lit across her skin like tattoos of the stars. She opened her eyes, and the cave shook. Kai ran forward as the cave cracked. Villari rose from the pool, her body glowing red and gold. Her eyes were no longer just stars. They were galaxies. Kai, she said, her voice layered with something deeper now. I remember everything. He helped her stand. What did you see? She looked at him, truly looked. You, me, the past, the future. I saw a galaxy where peace is possible again. And I saw who I need to be to make it happen. He smirked. Let me guess. Terrifying warrior with a soft side. She laughed. Something like that. But before they could move, a blast shook the entrance. Silent Root had found them. Villari turned, her body shining with echo flame power. This time, she said, her voice calm, we end it. Tyrellan heart, human soul. The cave shook again. Dust rained from the ceiling. Cracks split across the walls like lightning frozen in stone. And through those cracks came the unmistakable echo of war, boots slamming on rock, energy weapons charging, and the harsh, wordless roars of Silent Root. Kai grabbed Villari's arm. We're not ready. She stepped forward. Her skin glowed with the red-gold light of the echo flame, ancient symbols still dancing across her arms. Her tentacles lifted behind her, calm and coiled, like serpents waiting to strike. I am, she said softly. From the shadows of the tunnel, the Silent Root poured in. 10, 15, 20 black-armored soldiers, all faceless, emotionless, moving like machines. At their front stood the warlord, taller than the rest. A cloak of burning fabric flowed behind him, and in one hand he carried a strange curved blade that hummed with unstable energy. He raised his hand, and all motion stopped. Then he pointed at Kai. The human dies. The Tyrellan traitor returns to us in chains. Villari stepped between them. No, she said. He lives, and I choose what I become, not you. The warlord tilted his head. Then you choose death. The room exploded into chaos. Blasts of green light flew across the chamber. Crystal shards burst from the walls. Echo flame pulsed, throwing strange shadows everywhere. Kai ducked behind a stone pillar. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. He didn't even have a real weapon. But he had courage, and the wrist mark still burning with Villari's energy. He peeked out and saw her. Villari in battle. Not the careful, quiet warrior she had been before, but a force of nature. Her tentacles lashed through the air, slicing through armor like paper. Her blade danced with light. She moved faster than thought, each step a blur of power and precision. She wasn't just fighting. She was becoming. The echo flame wasn't just a memory. It was a gift. And Villari was using it to show the world what the old Tyrellans had once been, before fear and hate had twisted them into killers. But she couldn't fight them all. Even with her power, the numbers grew. More soldiers poured into the cave. One fired a blast that hit her side. She stumbled. Kai saw it. And he moved. He picked up a fallen soldier's weapon, clumsy, heavy, and clearly not meant for humans. But he ran forward anyway, and he stood beside her. Valerie turned, surprised. "What are you doing?" Kai aimed the weapon, badly, probably dying, but I figured you could use a distraction. She laughed, a real one. "Stay close," she said, "and don't die. I'm not done being mad at you yet." They fought side by side. Valerie's tentacles shielded them both. Kai fired wildly, shouting more from panic than purpose, but somehow, it worked. They moved as one. When Valerie struck high, Kai rolled low. When Kai was pinned, her tentacles tore through the threat, and as the battle raged, something stronger than adrenaline kept them standing. The bond. It wasn't just energy or memory now. It was alive. It connected their minds, their hearts. She felt his fear, but also his courage. He felt her rage, but also her hope. And as they touched, briefly, hands locking in the center of fire, it happened. The mark on Kai's wrist exploded in golden light. A shockwave rippled through the cave. Every silent root soldier froze. Their armor shimmered, then cracked. The warlord staggered back, his blade dimming. "What have you done?" he growled. Valerie stepped forward, eyes glowing. "We completed the true bond." The warlord raised his weapon again. "Then you will die together." He charged. The final duel was quick, but unforgettable. Valerie met him head-on, her blade against his, sparks flying. Kai moved behind, distracting, dodging. But the warlord was strong, his blade cut deep. One of Valerie's tentacles was severed. She fell to one knee. "Kai, run!" But he didn't. He stepped in front of her. "No." The warlord laughed. "You would die for her." Kai nodded. "No, I'd live for her. That's worse for you." And then something incredible happened. The energy from his wrist mark flowed outward, into the cave, into the stone, into the very air. The memory skulls on the walls lit up. One by one. Thousands. The cave became a storm of light. Voices filled the air, not yelling, not screaming, but singing. A chant of old warriors. The truth they died to protect. The bond they died to remember. Valerie stood, shaking, but stronger than before. "I'm not just one warrior," she whispered. "I'm all of them." She struck the warlord with a blade of light. He screamed, armor splitting, and fell. Gone. The rest of Silent Root fled, scattered by light, by fear, by the truth now screaming through every crystal in the mountain. The war was not over, but the silence had ended. Later, after the echoes faded and the cave calmed, Valerie and Kai sat together in the middle of the chamber. She leaned on him, tired. He held her, quiet. No jokes, no flirting, just breathing. Together. Finally, she spoke. "You didn't run." He smiled. "Told you. I like trouble." She looked at him. Her eyes, still glowing, softened. "You're more than that." He turned. "Yeah. You're brave, foolish, honest, and something I didn't think existed anymore." He blinked. "What's that?" She smiled. "Mine." And she kissed him. This time, no hesitation. Her tentacles wrapped gently around him, not as weapons, but as arms, as heart, as home. Outside the cave, the stars were changing. A signal pulsed from the grave of minds. A call. A message. The old truth had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Her tentacled response. The stars above Nearest 7 had never shone so brightly. Not in thousands of years. The mountain that held the grave of minds glowed like a heartbeat, pulsing with golden light every few seconds, sending out a signal that crossed space faster than any message, louder than any war cry. And people, across hundreds of planets, were listening. The truth was out. The ancient alliance between humans and Tyrellans was real. Ships arrived. At first, Just a few, small vessels, carrying rogue historians, peacekeepers, old Tyrellan monks who had lived in hiding. Then more. Warships, scouts, curious smugglers, even broken families, half human, half Tyrellan, who had lived in fear, thinking their very existence was wrong. They came to Neris 7 like it was a holy place. Because it was. And at the center of it all, sitting on the edge of the cliff, legs hanging over the abyss, sat Kai and Velari. Watching, waiting, wondering what they had started. Kai took a long breath, letting the cold wind push through his messy hair. He still had the same scar over his brow, still wore the same beat-up jacket. But something in his eyes had changed. He was no longer the careless pilot who flirted with danger. He had become something more. A symbol. Velari sat beside him, silent. Her skin still shimmered with the golden burn of the echo flame. Her tentacles moved slowly, gently, like they were calm for the first time in years. Her heart, once a locked vault, now beat in rhythm with his. She turned to him. They keep coming. Kai nodded. Guess we made some noise. They'll try to twist it. The empires, the factions, even the silent ones still hiding. They'll want to own the truth, or bury it again. Kai sighed. Let them try. He glanced down at his wrist. The mark still glowed, a soft pulse that matched Velari's heartbeat. We'll just keep telling the story, he said, over and over, if we have to. She looked at him. Together. He didn't smile this time. He just said, always. But peace never comes without a price. Above the clouds, in the dark of space, a fleet moved. Black ships, silent, sharp-edged and shadow-covered. The final route. The last and oldest branch of the silent route order. The ones who had never stopped hunting. The ones who had waited for the signal, not to follow it, but to crush it. At their head flew a command cruiser, twice the size of Zereth Prime. Inside, a single voice echoed through the dark. We warned them. The bond is poison. If it spreads, we fall. Destroy the planet. Burn the mines. Kill the bond. Down on the surface, Velari tensed suddenly. Kai looked at her. What is it? She closed her eyes. I feel them. The others. The ones who never stopped hating. He stood. Then we prepare. But Velari shook her head. No, we speak first. Kai raised a brow. That's not the Velari I met at the bar. She smiled faintly. She died the moment you touched my cheek. Kai laughed. That sounds dramatic. You were, she replied. So I had to match you. Within hours, a signal was sent from Neris 7. Not a threat. Not a demand. A message, recorded by both human and Tyrellan hands. A declaration of truth. We are not enemies. We were never meant to be. The bond is real. The war was a lie. The past will not be erased again. This planet, this memory, this flame, belongs to all of us. You do not have to understand us, but you will not silence us. The final route did not respond. Not with words. They fired. Massive energy beams struck the surface of Neris 7. The mountains cracked. The skies turned red. The grave of mines trembled as shockwaves spread across the planet. But something happened they didn't expect. The bond fought back. Velari dropped to her knees at the heart of the temple ruins. Her hands touched the ground, and her tentacles extended like roots into the stone. The energy from the echo flame surged through her, into the caves, the skulls, the very bones of the mountain. And Kai, his mark flaring, took her hand. Together, they became the living bond. The crystals exploded in light. A dome of pure memory rose over the entire planet, protective, glowing, unstoppable. The next energy strike from orbit hit the shield and shattered instead. Ships across the system saw it. Gasps filled command decks. The signal from Neris 7 was no longer just data. It was defiance. On distant worlds, revolts began. Half-Terrellan children stepped into the light for the first time. Human and alien scholars reopened forbidden texts. Old enemies called each other, not with weapons, but with questions. The final root had tried to end something. Instead, they had made it eternal. Down on the planet, the shield held. But Velari was fading. The energy was too much. Her skin flickered. Her breathing slowed. Her tentacles dimmed. "Kai," she whispered. "No," he said, holding her tight. "You're not doing this alone." She smiled. "I'm not. That's why I can go." His voice cracked. "Go where?" "Into the memory," she said, "where the bond lives, where no one can erase it again." Tears burned in his eyes. "You can't leave." She leaned forward, kissed his forehead. "I'm not leaving," she said. "I'm becoming." And with that, she let go. Her body dissolved into golden light, wrapped in flame, in memory, in love. The last thing Kai saw was her smile. Then she was gone. The next day, silence returned to Neris 7. But it was no longer empty. The grave of minds held a new voice, a new keeper, Velari. And beside her crystal skull, a second one formed, human-shaped, glowing faintly, still unfinished. It waited. For him. Years passed. The war never truly came. Because the memory of what happened on Neris 7 spread faster than fear. Velari's final light became a legend. And Kai. Kai became its keeper. He rebuilt the temple, guided both species, and whenever someone asked what really happened, he simply smiled and said, "I flirted with an alien girl. She flirted back with tentacles." And the galaxy changed forever.